for having us. I'm another white guy, so I'm going to keep it short. But I'm the director of Land is Life, which is an international coalition of indigenous communities, leaders, and organizations that was started in 1992 at the original Rio Conference for Sustainable Development. And since then, we've developed an amazing network of individuals, organizations, leaders all over the world who are doing amazing work on the ground. We serve as the International Secretariat here in New York. We're a small group of people. And we basically help these amazing organizations carry out their work every day in any way that we can. If you look at the world today, indigenous peoples are roughly 4 to 5% of the world's population. It's 60% of the world's languages, and the lands in which that 4 to 5% reside on protect 80% of the world's biodiversity. So if you're talking the biggest bang for your buck, whether you care about conservation, environmental issues, or human rights, investing in indigenous peoples to remain the rights to their territories is by far the best thing you can do. Jiten just arrived off the plane from Manipur, India. He serves as the secretary for the Center for Research and Advocacy in Manipur. He's a climate change specialist. He specializes in international human rights processes and false climate change solutions. He's an absolutely amazing individual to work with every day. He serves as our regional coordinator in Asia, where he's deploying small funds anywhere from $200 to $3,000 rapidly and in a flexible manner to indigenous organizations around his region. And it's a great honor to have him here. So without further ado, I'll give you Jiten Yumnam.
Yeah, good afternoon. I just wanted to thank the School of Visual Arts here in New York for this special invitation and giving me this privilege to share some of our experience on the rights and concern of indigenous peoples. And here, just on the onset, I'm actually coming here to briefly attend, right, in the UN there is this post-2015 summit, no, where the UN will be adopting the new Sustainable Development Goals. We come here with a lot of both hope and concerns, no? And why we are having hope and concern is based on the reality that we confront in our day-to-day experience. So I just wanted to share on some of the basic concern in our own context and to relate with why we are here. Yeah, so I come from a place called Manipur that's in northeast part of India, and you could see Manipur, it's bordering with Burma, and on the other side you see the northeast part of region, and you see Bangladesh, China is there, Bhutan is there. It's a small place, but then it's an armed conflict-prone area. Still, the indigenous peoples there, we are broadly classified as the Meitei, the Kuki, and the Naga. So all of this comes together, and there is an ongoing movement for self-determination to have greater control over our land and resources. And the state, at least it's in India, so the government of India's response tends to be more of the military response. So it doesn't want to recognize the right to self-determination of indigenous community because the self-determination is very important for the indigenous community. It allows us to assert our rights and also to manage our own way of life and our own sustainable management of our land and resource. So there is a military response, and in fact, Manipur is one of the most militarized region, in Asia and probably across the world as well. So we have series of emergency law. Some of the emergency law includes the Armed Forces Special Powers Act, which allows Indian Armed Forces to operate in Manipur without any regulation. So that is one of the. So there is a series of human. And if you see the photograph, these are some of the people who are extrajudicially executed, and the armies and the police responsible for this continues to remain without any justice delivery. So I just wanted to flag up this aspect. And if you come to Manipur, almost every part is militarized. You'll find one army camp from one after another. So these are some of the cases. The sexual violence, the violence against women is also one of the another form of violence. This is for a very infamous case in 2004 where this woman was arrested, raped, and then murdered. And there was a series of protests, and one of the protests is a naked protest by the elders of Manipur, elderly women. So that's the context, But then I also wanted to, because of our geographical proximity, we are close to Burma, and which means we are just at the corridor of Southeast Asia, and on the left is South Asia. So we are almost in the middle of two very big regions, So what happened now is the government of India also wanted to expand its trade and relationship with Southeast Asia. So now they wanted to pass through Manipur. No? So there is a series of policy which are planned. The Look East policy is there, and now India comes up with a new economic liberalization process. So whereby it open up its economy, trying to reach out to Southeast Asia. So which means there is a lot more infrastructure project coming in. And fortunately or unfortunately, our region is also very rich in water, minerals. You name any minerals, no? Oil, coal, chromium. Almost a lot of minerals is found in our land. Even uranium is found not in Manipur but across nearby. There's a place called Meghalaya. So this region, Manipur and also northeast part of India, the river called Brahmaputra. Brahmaputra River is one of the world's largest river. So we have series of tributaries along this river. So the government is planning to build more than 200 dams in our region, northeast region. And in Manipur alone, there is a process to build nearly 20 dams. No? So already several memorandum of understanding has been signed. So the challenge with the India's Look East policy and development process is like this kind of development process which are pursued, no? Not just this extractive industry, mining, oil or dam, but there are also a lot of infrastructure projects, the road projects, the railway project. So when these are planned to connect with South Asia and Southeast Asia, and which all pass through our land. So this is a process which has failed to recognize the indigenous people's right to self-determination again, In the earlier place, the political recognition is not there, but now there is no recognition of the indigenous people's self-determination of land. Why we're talking about land? Because for the indigenous community who's been living with our land, who's been living our, in our ancestral domain, which our ancestors passed on us, to nurture and to, so that we pass on to our coming generation. Because land is very important and dear for us because it's what we depend for our survival. No, a lot of us depend because still a lot of people depend on agriculture, depend on the traditional forms of agriculture, and a lot of people depend on our water, on our forest, on our wetland, through various forms of cultivation. So without tacit recognition, and also because through that relationship with land for our survival, there is also a culture, not just our own traditional culture, but also a culture of sustainable management of our land and resource and environment. No? So that very different culture is also persistent within our midst. So when we find the new form of development coming in our land, so what I mentioned, there are issues of big dams coming in our land. We have the special economic zone because of the Look East India policy. We have the uncontrolled mining projects coming in. We have the, and in this whenever this kind of large-scale development projects comes in our land, it's again associated with militarization, because there is this political moment for self-determination. So the government want to make sure that their whatever development initiative is, whatever infrastructure they wanted to protect it again, which means it lead to further militarization of our land. When we have military people occupying our land, it again turns out to be another form of land grabbing. It turns out to be another form of land alienation of our people. So that is one additional concern, and along with that, the forced land grabbing is something that is becoming an obvious reality in our land, and which compel many of people to resist, because ultimately if we lose land, we cannot survive, no. So in our effort to defend our land, so there is increased military response from the state as well. So the military response is not just to subdue our self-determination, but then also to subdue our effort to defend our land, to defend our own way of life and to defend our own survival rights, not just for the present generation, but also for the coming generation. And along with it, there are series of policies which are proposed, and these are policies which are more framed towards favoring or promoting the interests of the companies, multinational corporate bodies. So today in Manipur and also in our region, we find lots of multinational corporate bodies from Europe, from Korea, from Japan. There are so many corporate bodies which are entering our land, and the problem is like these are policies which are formed without respecting or without involving the indigenous peoples. Like because we have our own ways of how we consider it as development. Because our ways, our aspiration, our needs, our developmental priorities is something which is negated. There is no when the decision making for defining this policy or for pursuing the kind of larger development model is something which is defined by the state along with the corporate bodies, no? And I think that is a trend which is happening not just in India. The reason why we are coming here is also part of that, no? Because out here we also see the big powerful countries conniving with their own corporate bodies, no? Like, so for example, if you see the rich developed country in Europe or even in North America, we find a lot of these countries having huge favoritism over their corporate interests, no? Because ultimately the countries big economies like Japan, Europe, or even US, or even Canada, because the entire economy seems to run on the corporate interest, no? Corporate expansionism. And that expansionism is intruding into indigenous people land and territory, because most of the mining company based here or Canada or Australia, because because they want to mine in indigenous territory all over, no? So, and that is a reality not just in our land, in our territory, and that is something which is happening all over most of the indigenous people's territory, you know. And as Casey was referring to, most of the most biodiverse rich area, most of the mineral rich area happens to be in indigenous people's territory all over, you know. So that's where the impact is not just limited to social impact, but then also environmental impact and also conflict, no? And also the moment for self-determination is growing all over. Yeah, so that's a policy challenge. When I try to refer to policy challenge, it's not just limited to our own local context, because the local reality is something which is also influenced by the larger process, no? So that's why we are concerned. And when we come here, we said you should respect indigenous people's rights, you should respect human rights, you should ensure that the indigenous people's right to free, prior, informed consent should be respected, you know. And whatever development decision-making process at the larger level should respect the right to self-determination of indigenous people, so that our self-determined, our a process with respect our wish, our aspiration, our tradition, our culture, our inherent and inalienable relationship with land is being respected, no? So that is something that we try to push through and bring forward, not just at the local level, but also here. In terms of the violation, we have in Manipur, like we have several dams. Some of the dams, like Mapitel Dam, this has already caused series of violations, no? Submergence of agricultural land, this is the recent submerging of a school, for example. Submergence of, and when it's submerged in upstream portion, in the downstream we have water shortage, complete drying of a river. So we already find, and this region is also militarized, no? Which means the military is there to control and promote the corporate interest there. This is another big dam proposed in Manipur, 1,500 megawatt. This will submerge more than 300 square kilometers of land, of forest land, not excluding the other agricultural land to be submerged, no? Just only forest land, it's more than 300 square kilometers. And several indigenous communities are depending on this forest and agricultural land for survival, no? And the decision-making process for this dam is again highly controversial because of the exclusion and the insensitivity and incompatibility to the wish and rights of the. So I will not go to the impacts. There are series of impacts that we foresee. This is the proposed dam site. This is the small village that will be completely submerged, you know, right in the near the dam site proposed. So there has been and it's not just our impact, but and we also try to respond to this, you know, in whatever way we can. And there are series of protests in Manipur. There are series of mobilization, series of efforts to unite, you know, try to inform each other within our own context, and try to build more solidarity, unity, and respond in whatever way we can. This is another destructive. This looks small, but in terms of impact, because it holds back entire water of a particular lake called Loktak, and it's one of the most controversial dam in Manipur. It's small, but it submerges more than nearly 80,000 acres of agricultural land when the water level is rise to more than 20 meters. It used to be a small wetland, but now it's converted into reservoir. No? I'll not go into details. So this is one of the resistance by the Loktak project affected community, because the government tries to bring in more corporate bodies to control the wetland. No? So the community land is the access and management of community resource, no? Community land and wetland and forest is something which the government try to curtail increasingly in our context. No? So there is another effort to drill oil in our land. Manipur, again, like unfortunately or unfortunately, we have oil. So a company called Jubilant Energy based in Holland, based in Netherlands, has been awarded contract, no, 100%. So there is, so when they try to drill oil, it completely ignores communities' right again, and in that process, when they wanted to drill oil, they try to divide the community. So when they try to divide the community, they use military, they use whatever means, they use money, and they try to manipulate the existing political system. So there is a lot more confusion apart from, there is a lot more division within our own community and society, So that is something people also try to understand and try to respond. So this is one of the mobilization against oil exploration in Manipur. Yeah, this is again one of the mobilization. Yeah, and just recently we also find a lot more of it's not just the multinational corporation, we also find the international financial institutions like the World Bank, the Asian Development Bank, also supporting the corporate bodies, and also the government to, and in that process there is nowhere to respect communities' right again. So I think that is again helping, the international financial institutions are actually helping in unleashing further violation in our land and territory. Yeah, so there are several case studies, but I will not go into those. This is one particular project which will lead to loss of our agricultural land. So when we lose our agricultural land or forest or water, it will not just undermine our food sovereignty or food security. It will also undermine our political rights. It will also undermine our, the intergenerational survival of our coming generation as well. So, so there are multiple impacts. Yeah, and the most important aspect of this pursuance is again the force, the use of force, the undemocratic, the autocratic nature of state, and I think that is something which has been more further consolidated in our context, and amidst this kind of reality, the different indigenous communities come together and try to assert their rights, try to call for a more democratic decision-making process. Try to call for a more participatory, development decision-making process. But then, what we witness is like there is increased exclusion or increased operation from the state. State operation tends to be increasing in our context instead of respecting our rights. And also, we also try to bring in or refer to the international human rights law. Like for example, for indigenous community, there is a concrete declaration called the UN Declaration on Indigenous Peoples' Rights, which outline specific rights for the indigenous community, including right to self-determination. Right to self-determination can have different connotations, according to different reality. It doesn't mean complete separation from a country. It can be, any process based on what that particular community or particular people decide. So we try to refer to those international agreements. Declaration, for example, to be applied in our own context, but the state again tends to negate, because they don't want to use the term indigenous peoples in our own context. They said if you use indigenous people, then they will go for self-determination. So they try to perceive more from their own political and economic interests. So that is something that we also have a challenge. Yeah. So in our context, this Armed Forces Special Powers Act, one of the most draconian law, the undemocratic law, continues to be enforced in our context. So under this kind of political subjugation and also the kind of neoliberal economic growth-oriented kind of development process, fast unfolding in our land, in complete negation of our rights, that kind of reality compels our people to seek for our self-determination more and more, and also for a self-determined development process. Because ultimately, without our land, without our wetland, without our forest, without our water, we cannot survive. So, so that's a message that we wanted to carry out here, and we want a development with takes consideration of the other alternative, which has been another way of life and other practices which contribute to the real sustainable development. I mean, if we talk more from the sustainable development point of view. So that's what I want to share at this point of time, and I will be glad to, discuss if there are any questions or comments. Thank you very much. Thank you.